We had a chance on Election Day last year. There were a lot of reasons that the president got reelected. One of them was we put up the one candidate of all those Republicans running who could not talk about Obamacare without, you know, a little weakness there, because they really did model it a great deal after Romneycare. And it's sure you can say, oh yeah, but the state is really, that's the petri dish where we can test things. But you actually put socialized medicine forward in your state. So if it's good enough for your state, why isn't it good enough for the country? Well, it wasn't great for the state, and it's not great for the country. And it is going to cut into the health care that people can get. And I did read the bill before I voted against it. I could see that AARP, they got a sweetheart deal, a number of things, but they're not going to have to pay the 2% tax that other insurance providers will for their form of insurance. They have got a waiver on the cap for executive pay for insurance providers. And it became readily apparent that AARP was not looking out for the best interests of the seniors. Big pharmaceuticals, you know, they have expanded people's ability to live and live better with all the research and development they've done. And the main reason our drugs are so expensive in the United States is that many countries around the world have put a cap and said, you will not collect research and development costs from our citizens if you're going to sell your drug here. You can collect the cost of manufacture and a certain percentage over that as profit. Basically, folks, we've been paying for the research and development. We're really subsidizing most of the world when it comes to medications. Well, if you read the Obamacare bill, you will find the big pharmaceutical companies are going to make billions and billions more than they ever had initially. That's why they were willing to say, oh yeah, we'll give so many billion back. They're making billions more than they ever have in the short term. But as I've told some of the representatives, for the long term, you've signed your death warrant. 10, 12 years from now, you're going to be in a position where you can't really collect R&D even from American patients, and you're going to be relegated to what you are in most countries. And there goes all the great research, the life-enhancing, the life-saving medication that great research has produced. It's just a dumbing down of the system. You know, we've got, got so many friends who are RNs, LVNs, physician's assistants, but we're getting lobbied being told, look, you know, doctors can't afford to do these anymore, so we need to classify these down to where we can take care of these for the doctor. This is what it does. And it won't be very long in the future. Doctors will be saying, look, we can't afford to pay back our loans for the amount of money that's dropped so far that we're making now, so you'll end up combining med school and college. I'm just predicting, okay? You'll end up having internships, residencies, and I know there've been some combination trying to figure out ways to save time and money on medical education, but you'll see the squeeze really happen, and we'll become like some countries where it doesn't take long to be a doctor and there are not many people that want to do it. Because unless you're getting really well paid, why would you want to deal with people's bodily functions day in, day out? I mean, really. And I want the best and brightest we've got. There are true Second Amendment threats that you should be concerned about. For example, the president's expected any day to counter the will that so many members of Congress and the Senate have talked about, and that is, we do not want the president signing a UN treaty on small arms restrictions, because what comes next after the treaty, if it were to be a part of our law, is next we start registering American guns across the board. And as country after country historically has shown, if you're going to take up people's guns, the first thing you do is register them. And I know there's some differences of opinions there, but I would encourage you to encourage our senators. I think Ted Cruz is solid, but even when you know a senator is rock solid and believes like you do, it does not hurt to call or email his office, because there are times when an issue is a close call and there are problems with a law, there are good things and bad things, and I will ask my office, how many emails and calls have we gotten in support of and against? I want to know what people are thinking. And if good folks don't let my office know how you feel about a bill, and you've got these people that use the auto dial, or got to hire a kid that calls in and says, yes, don't vote for this, don't vote for this, then you don't really get a good representation. So your voice still makes a difference, very much so. With regard to Benghazi, of course, we're coming up on a year. If you go back and look on 9/9/9/10, the brother of the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, Howard Dowery, had indicated that, gee, there's about to be violence against the United States, but I want to negotiate a peace here. If you will release some of our radical Islamist brothers that you have confined, and especially the blind sheikh, then we'll be able to avoid your having violent problems. And of course, he probably knew something, being the brother of the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. So should anybody have been shocked on 9/11 when there was protests in Cairo, and people climbed up on the wall and we did nothing about it? They took down our flag, which is an act of war, and we did nothing about it. And in Benghazi, some of y'all were aware, I had talked some months ago to one of the 3 people that were on the rooftop providing fire cover for the survivors at Benghazi. And one was Ty Woods, one was Glenn Doherty, and one was, I wouldn't talk about his name until Catherine Herridge found out about it from other sources, and then she wanted to get a statement from me about David being a hero. And I emailed David and said, David, I've maintained your wish. I've not talked about you. I still wish you'd come forward and tell your story. But do you mind if I talk to Catherine Herridge for Fox News about you? And he emailed back, use your own judgment. Well, I thought it was okay to talk about him being a hero. He went up there with the rooftop. He was a former Army Ranger. And for those that have been in the Army or been in the military, Marines, in ground warfare, you know, if you're taught to use mortars or artillery, you're taught that if you fire 3 rounds, then you can triangulate. It's called bracketing your target. The 4th round, you make a little calculation, the 4th round should always be dead on your target. And so if you're a Marine or you're in the infantry, you're taught if there are 3 rounds go off around you, mortars or artillery, you better move, because the 4th one's right on top of your position. So when David said we were on the rooftop providing cover fire, and they fired 3 mortar rounds first, and I said, oh, they bracketed you. And he said, oh, no, the first one missed, but we knew from the very first mortar round, they knew exactly, precisely where they were firing. Mortar 2 and 3 were just dead, literally dead on top of them, and that killed Ty and Glenn and took much of David's right leg. When he looked down, he didn't think he'd be able to save his leg. He thought they'd have to amputate if he lived, because he was losing a lot of blood. He gives credit to the State Department employees that knew how to bind up a wound like that was that severe. They had no pain medicine. And it was about 13 hours or so after that, a total of about 20 hours after the attacks started, that they finally brought in a plane. And it wasn't any kind of medical evac plane, so he rather took a beating, being loaded onto the plane through a little aircraft door. And again, without any kind of painkillers. They deserve better than that. And when our president and our military said, well, we didn't have anything that could get there any sooner than we did, 20 hours from the time that it first started. I mean, I had flown from Andrews Air Force Base right outside Washington to Jordan, way the other side of Egypt, way the other side of Libya, in less than 10 hours. And they couldn't get a plane there. They had C-130, they had special ops there in the Mediterranean area. They could have gotten there, and they just never gave the order. And we still don't have people coming forward and telling the truth about that. Ty Wood's widow has become a friend, and in fact, she emailed me, called, and we had talked before, but when she found out Daryl Issa was going to have a hearing, she contacted me and said, I told you I really don't want to do interviews, because Sean had asked if she'd come on. His father had come on before, and she really didn't, but she said, I would like to come to that hearing. And so I immediately emailed Daryl Issa, and he immediately emailed back, tell me how many seats you need. Said, well, her sister and her, and I told her if she's willing to come, I will be with her, and she said that would help immensely. So it was quite an eye-opening hearing, but it's not a fraction of what needs to come out. So there's a lot we don't know. I know more than's come out in hearing, but there's a lot we don't know, and we need to get to the bottom of it. With regard to the debt crisis, we reached the 16.699 trillion figure. Debt limit reached back in mid-May. Well, there have been a lot of things that have been done by the Treasury Secretary back that Geithner said he couldn't do back a couple of years ago, if you recall, back in 2011. He just couldn't do. You know, there was no way to avoid it. It was going to be a dead date on August 1st or 2nd. Everything was going to fall apart. Well, they've been able to do things for a few months now to avoid having to raise the debt ceiling. But that fight's about to come forward too. And just so you understand what happened in 2011, in January through March, we were told, you know, many of us were saying, we need to stand firm on this CR. Let's don't extend the CR. This is too important on a number of these issues. And, you know, whether it's Obamacare, whether there were just so much overspending, cutting the stimulus bills that were just $900 billion. And frankly, y'all, I love George W. Bush, but if he had not pushed for the Wall Street bailout of $700 billion and gotten that, there is no way President Obama could have ever gotten $900 billion in a stimulus bill. It would not have happened. And then there would have been no way that any president could have gotten away with pushing for $1 trillion deficits annually.